Dr. Paul, let's talk about China and the US now. Geopolitical tensions, as you know, have been ramping up, not just recently, but over the last few years, and in particular when Donald Trump came to power and started the trade wars with China. Now, I wonder, when I look around the world, I wonder how much of this is simply due to economic competition between two great economic powers, or do you think the Americans are still staying true to the Truman doctrine of containing communism? Is that still happening?
Probably a little bit of that, a little bit of both. The whole fact is that if it's competition, there is always competition. But we are the wealthiest, strongest country in the world, and we do have an empire. So if we're not competing well, maybe it's our fault. Yeah. So I'm obviously in favor of free trade. The more we trade, the better it is for everybody. I'd rather see us trading with Cuba and wherever. But China it's more or less a scapegoat, which is very unpopular to say. That's unpatriotic to say that we have some responsibility for ourselves. But we need to stop the interference in trade. I think free trade will neutralize the disagreements that we have, but we always seem to have an enemy. But we've had too much intervention in the trade business with this administration, and I think that's risky. And I think it provides the incentive to keep the military budget going, because we have an enemy out there. China is going to attack us, and all these things. And look, yesterday there was an article, a program saying China's Navy is bigger than the United States Navy because of the way they were counting the ships and things. But everybody has to do that to justify more expenditures, even though we spend more money than the 10 next countries on militarism. So I think a military industrial complex is very, very powerful. They've been taken care of. But when the calamity really hits, that'll be undermined too. And I think that's why we're slipping as a world power, because I think the dollar is slipping, and I think our power is slipping. Our financial conditions are bad, and we're losing support. And I think that's a natural consequence of the type of policy that we have. And I think what we need is more freedom.
What's interesting to me is the change in foreign policy response to Chinese aggression over the last 2 decades or so. You remember that in 1996, we had the Taiwan Strait crisis when tensions between China and Taiwan flared up. And at the time, President Clinton responded by sending an aircraft carrier battle group into the Taiwan Strait itself as a direct challenge to China. Could this kind of military response happen today?
I think probably would. I mean, we're over there already, in South China Sea, just looking for an accident to happen, which I think is totally unnecessary. I don't think I feel more secure because we're over there. I feel less secure because we're over there pestering a country that far away and looking for a problem. And that's not to say the Chinese aren't, up to their old tricks again. But I just think that we shouldn't be there. Well, what would we say if China had as much activity in the Gulf of Mexico as we have in the South China Sea? I mean, the Americans would be really, really annoyed by that, and we can understand that. We didn't like it when the Soviets were in Cuba. It was getting pretty close to home, but I just don't think that we need to be to so many places. And it's a false statement to say it's for everything's for national security. Right. That's just a cliche for spending more money for the military-industrial complex.
One of the things that investors are concerned about is a permanent decoupling of relationships between China and the U.S., which would have severe negative repercussions for the economy and the stock markets. Do you think this is at all reversible?
Oh, yes, but you have to reverse the opinion of the people who promote it. In spite of the independence that our president has expressed and works on, I still think there is a strong subtleness, so to speak, of the deep state's influence. And the deep state are those people who promote the militarism and all. And then when you look at even in our appointment today, when you look at the Secretary of State, I mean, it's always looking for aggravation, which is, and I don't think the right way to go. I think that makes things much worse. But if there is a total decoupling, I think it is very, very bad. It's in a way, it's microscopic between the problems we've had with Cuba over all these years. And if this would happen with China, they're not. It's going to be quite a bit different, and that's why we should be codependent on people. When you're in free trade, you become dependent on each other, and it's impossible for each country to say, "Yeah, that's the case, but I'm going to change your habits. I'm going to change your social policy and go over either to another country." That means you open the door for people to come in here and change our social condition.
How high is the threat of real war, you think, right now?
Well, there is. I'm worried more about an accident, a false flag or just a planned accident and then an overreaction. Yeah. Because I think they play the game that we have to be tough. We're appealing. And I think both sides do that. You have to appeal to the base and show that you're patriotic and you're going to take care of people and provide protection for them. But no, I think the fact that there's so many weapons around. Why are we involved in developing more nuclear weapons, more modern technology, and all that is not a good way to go. It's very costly and very dangerous. So hopefully we could get people to see the light that being friends and traders are much better, recognizing the dangers of it. But sure. I think you're less likely to fight with people that you're trading with because both sides should be benefiting from free trade.
Finally, Dr. Paul, I'd like to talk about your view on the investment landscape. Earlier in the interview, you talked about the biggest financial bubble you've seen right now. In light of this, in light of geopolitical tensions, in light of mistakes made by the Federal Reserve, where should investors be heading right now?
Well, they could start off with saying a little prayer, and that's not going to solve the problem. But, when I got interested in this subject of money and how you preserve wealth, I got fascinated with monetary policy in the 1960s and read the predictions that the breakdown of the Bretton Woods would come. And I thought, if that happens, I imagine that people will be looking to protect themselves. So that is when, even when it was barely legal to do it, I would buy coin as an insurance policy, not so much in an investment where I'm going to make a buck in a year or two, but protecting real assets would have to be by investing in metals, I think. And I've been always wondering why other people who were more attuned to the market would be predicting, silver is going to go up again. And they've been doing that for 10 or 15 years, but it looks like silver is going up again. And then once it breaks loose, it's going to huge. I think the metals are a good place to go. But my real investment is in education and trying to get people to understand why sound money is important, why individual is important. I think the investment I put into it is trying to keep people excited. If they want to be free and happy and prosperous, they should promote the cause of liberty. That is the most important one. And, to some people, and I understand it, will go and hide someplace and take their assets someplace. But no, I think my fight is right here in this country. And that is to do what I can to promote the significance and the importance of advocating individual liberty. We had a hint of it. We knew what the founders thought about it. They knew something about sound money, and we should go back to improving upon that, because I think over 100 years we have been just, downplaying a disintegration of those fundamental truths that were established with our Constitution.
How does a libertarian like yourself view gold as an asset? What is the role of gold for a libertarian like yourself? I mean, it's not really a company. It doesn't add any value in itself to American capitalism. Does it really promote this ideal of freedom and financial freedom that you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it's the only real way to do it and ignore what they're doing. I get frustrated because I try to protect myself and my family. And I went through the 70s. My parents did okay because if they'd get cash, there was money floating around. They did buy a CD and they made sometimes 10, 15% on it. But you can't do that now. So people with money, I really don't have anybody has an easy answer for that, because putting your money in the CD, you're losing money. So I think people who like to trade and do all the studies and think they can outguess what the planners are doing, some people will do that. But I think that the real long-term protection is to protect yourself in sound money, because it's a bellwether. The gold tells us what's really going on, even though it gets sluggish at times, gets overreactive at times. But just think about the Fed. When the Fed inherited the management of the dollar in 1913, gold was $20 an ounce. What have they done to it? Now it's $2,000 an ounce. So we know which direction it's going in. But I've never advocated people to say, "Oh, you can make a killing. Gold is going to do this in 3 months. Go into the future." I personally don't like that, but a lot of people can make a lot of money on that. But no, I think just the measurement of value has best been done over the many, many centuries by the holding of the metals gold and silver. And I think it's good advice for all of us.
I have one last question for you, Dr. Paul. I'm a millennial. What advice do you have for people in their late 20s to early 30s?
Well, I haven't divided up pieces of liberty and think for one group it's more valuable than for another one. When I was in Congress, they would change districts around. And one time I had mostly a rural district. Then it was turned into an urban district. And the media would come and say, "Oh, you're not representing the farmers so much now. You're representing these chemical workers. What are you going to do differently?" Absolutely nothing. Freedom works for everybody. If you have a free market, working people should do well, and everybody should be able to do well. So if you're in your 20s and 30s, my argument is what I'm advocating is probably maybe even a little more valuable for you. But if you're in retirement, you don't want to have your savings frittered away. So I think the best investment for everybody, no matter how old you are. I would state the time I got interested in this was even when I was in grade school, because I would deliver newspapers and my dad had a truck route, and I would always look at the coins, and we even had copper coins back then. And then there were silver coins, and I became fascinated with that. And yet we have systematically destroyed that because there's no real measurement. So if I could some way wave a wand or get our government to do it, it would be to wave the wand and eliminate about 95% of the economic education that people have received, from the universities, because the people in Washington, the people I knew, were well educated with the wrong information because they endorse what we're doing now. They will not argue on principle why you shouldn't have deficits. They argue that, and you pose this as a challenge to me, how are you going to take care of the people? The people need the check. They need their food. Well, don't depend on them because governments are undependable. You have to have an understanding of how the market works. And a bellwether for this is $1. Price of gold tells us a whole lot. And measuring that, I think the next thing that we should really work on for your sake and everybody's sake is get rid of this nonsense of rigging the most important price in the financial system, and that is of interest. Eliminate the free market interest rates, eliminates a whole lot of good judgment. So people now, like I said, there was one time when buying a CD because the interest rates were higher, you do one thing, but now it's much tougher. So eliminating the free market price of money, the interest rates, have been very devastating. So if I wanted to help young people and the elderly, that's what I would do. I would make sure the market rate of interest would be universal as much as I could make it.
Dr. Paul, it's been a tremendous honor speaking to you today.
Great, David. Nice to be with you.
And thank you for watching Kitco News. We'll have more for you. Stay tuned.